Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Idiot Soup. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Jeff.
We've reached an all-time low here at Idiot Soup in that I'm recording a podcast episode with my father because I've had to listen to him gripe and complain about the Louisiana gubernatorial elections for the past 3.5 months. So I figured, why not spare myself some lecture time and monetize this? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some really cool things that are happening in the country and also were very important to my home state, Louisiana. So there's been a lot of really important gubernatorial elections, specifically those in Kentucky and Mississippi, and the upcoming one on November 16th in Louisiana. And the Democratic Party is really hoping to use this as a measure that is indicative of a, wave of backlash against Trump's presidency and the current Republican Party in power. They're hoping that these elections are indicative of a growing swell of support for the Democratic Party instead. And they recently took home a massive victory in Kentucky when, actually earlier this afternoon, November 14th, former Governor Bevin finally conceded the election to Andy Beshear, who was the former Attorney General of Kentucky. And that was the election that everyone had their eyes on because that was a state that Trump won by 30 points. So a Democrat taking the House in a deep red state, such a state as red as Kentucky is, that was something that was really interesting for the Democratic Party. That was a big one that they were hoping to pull out. They didn't pull out Mississippi, but they did get that. So, Mr. Jeff, what are your views on this election, this inspiring, crazy election that happened in Kentucky?
So as it relates to the governorship of Louisiana, I don't know that it matters a great deal. You know, the former governor of Kentucky was sort of a prototype of Trump. A year before Trump announced his candidacy for the White House, this guy came off the sidelines as an outsider, a businessman, sort of a self-made person, took the Republican field by storm, but then proceeded to just irritate and isolate himself from everyone in Kentucky. And so I don't know that race is reflective of what was going to happen in Louisiana, but it does have bearings on how things might look nationally for the Republican Party. So today Trump's in Louisiana again for the third time, trying to boost Risponi, who is, I guess, been characterized as being sort of like Trump. He's a businessman and an outsider, never ran for office before, and he's in a dead heat with the Democratic candidate for Governor John Bel Edwards, who's the incumbent. And it's really hard to say how Trump's influence on the race is going to affect the turnout for the vote and the election itself.
Okay, well, I disagree. I would not call. President Trump is not my favorite. However, I would never insult him so much as to call him any type of relation to Bevin, even though he did support Bevin and kind of went out there and campaigned for him as he's doing for all the current Republican governors.
He had a wine fest before the election. He said, if you don't vote for this guy, they're gonna blame it on me. It'd be the worst defeat Trump ever had. And then he said, you can't let that happen to me.
Okay, well, obviously he supports Bevin, which he's shown support for every Republican governor in the country.
What for Mr. Bevin?
However, I don't think that the way that they're approaching politics necessarily is the same. I think that Bevin, despite how inflammatory President Trump is, I think Bevin still manages to be more inflammatory. I mean, this is the guy that ran against Mitch McConnell because he thought Mitch McConnell was too conservative. So there's that. And also, this is the guy that, so inspiring, he inspired a teacher strike by basically saying that he's going to take away their pension. The Attorney General sued him. I think, like you said, I don't think it's indicative of necessarily how the rest of the country is voicing their opinions. And I don't think it's indicative of where Kentucky falls when it comes to party lines, because Kentucky, the Republican Party did take back the Attorney General's office that the now governor-elect Beshear held. I think one of the only offices that was flipped was the governor's office. And I don't think it's because the people in Kentucky decided that they wanted a Democratic governor, I think it's because the people in Kentucky really just hated Bevin.
I think that one of the things that we're going to find out, and we may see this in Louisiana, depending on the outcome of the election, but the degree to which the Democratic candidate can successfully tie the Republican candidate to the president may be an indicator of Trump's lack of coattails in the coming year. I think that Trump's support is very, very fixed at 43% nationally. It's abysmal among Democrats, and it's almost non-existent among independents. So it takes more than 43% to win an election in any particular area of the country. And when the president can only pull 43% in any particular place, if that's all you're going to get, the Democrats, I think, are in a much better position to win independents.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Before Andy Beshear became the governor-elect, literally today, John Bel Edwards was the only governor from the Democratic Party in the entire South. He was the lone wolf by himself. So that made our election one of the most important ones coming up. Everyone was talking about it, from the national Fox network to CNN. It's really interesting to see Louisiana in the news because we're not on the news a lot, but we were important. But yeah, like you said, it's interesting to see that Trump doesn't have as much sway as people think he does. That being said, I also didn't expect this election to take the turn that it did, with Eddie Rispone being such a strong challenger against John Bel Edwards. And part of the reason I didn't was because President Trump refused to put his support behind one candidate, because you had Abrams and Rispone running both from the Republican Party, and Donald Trump refused to pick a candidate and wholeheartedly support them. So I assumed that that kind of split vote would really result in there wouldn't even be a runoff. I figured that it would just go to John Bel Edwards by a very slim margin.
Well, he may have learned his lesson from the Alabama runoff with Roy Moore, where he picked the dead horse in the gate. So as from the movie Aladdin, yes, he can be taught. I mean, maybe he's learning as he goes along here. I don't know. Bel Edwards is not a national Democratic candidate. So that's one of the things that the euphoria over Democrats taking the governorships in Kentucky and potentially retaining in Louisiana, I think is misplaced, because John Bel Edwards is a pro-life, moderate, almost conservative Democrat. He is not the Washington elite, liberal, prototypical Democrat. So his victory isn't a victory for the Democratic Party. It's a victory for the Democratic Party of Louisiana, which is very different than the National Democratic Party.
Well, I agree with you on the Louisiana front. However, on the Kentucky election, I think that one is really important for the Democratic Party, because when you look at Andy Beshear, he is what you would call, in terms of Washington, D.C. national politics, a true and through Democrat. Right?
Did that win the vote, or did the other guy
lose the vote?
Just screw the pooch?
Oh yeah, I think he did.
I think when you're a Republican and you're pissing off Republicans, you got a problem.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying is, like, even though it might not be a matter of who won the election versus who lost the election.
Look, if you're a Republican in Kentucky and Mitch McConnell doesn't want to vote for you, you got a problem.
No, because that was bad. He alienated everyone in the House. Everyone that was.
So the Democrats can't claim that as a victory so much as the Republicans just lost that game.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at it through more than just a lens of bipartisanship and political capital and everything, if a political party's true end goal is to actually see their change implemented in the world and see their platforms implemented in the world, then yeah, you can definitely see it as a win. Not everything has to be about, the national election. If the Democrats in Kentucky truly just want to see their version of a better Kentucky, I think that completely counts as a win. I think it's kind of, cynical to discount it as something that could be beneficial in their eyes for their state. So that's my view on that. But I agree with you, like you said, John Bel Edwards is not a traditionally what I would call a Democratic candidate. I don't know if people living outside of Louisiana have realized that very much, which is why, like, a lot of people here, we kind of joke around about it, call him a fake Democrat. He's pro-life, he's pro-guns. I mean, how much closer can you get to towing the line? So that's why I honestly was surprised to see a lot of resistance to his second term, because, honestly,
Louisiana has been a Republican state for some time. Yeah. The last Democratic governor was Kathleen Blanco.
Yeah.
We've had Republican governors ever since, and there were a couple of Republican governors before her. The South has been solidly conservative for some time. But the reason that John Bel Edwards won the election was because the Republicans learned the bitter lesson that the Democrats learned, that you don't run the wrong candidate in the wrong race. By running Vitter, they ran afoul of the sensibilities of Louisiana conservatives, and the only reason that the Democrats didn't beat Donald Trump was because they ran Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Right? And when you pick the worst candidate you can possibly put on the ballot, as the Kentucky Republicans did, a mop will beat that person. And here you have a situation where the governor of Louisiana is running for re-election on his merit. And I think he's going to probably win re-election, because most people,
knock on wood,
most people aren't interested in changing horses just because. And he hasn't done anything really to hurt the state. He's done some things well, and he's stood up for his conservative values. And I don't think people in Louisiana are interested in giving the governorship over to essentially some rich guy that thinks he can do a better job.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things is it's interesting to see, I guess, like straight ticket voting at its best, because Eddie Rispone is not someone that has painted himself as a candidate with strong political platform. He's not someone that has, he's polarizing, yeah, but for what? But
he has absolutely no platform at all.
His platform is that he voted for Trump, and that's everything. Like, I really want to ask him, like, is there anything Trump says that you disagree with?
He voted for Trump and gave Trump a truckload of money. That's his platform. And look, that's fine. I'm glad he's rich and glad he has money to invest in the candidates, and that's great. That's part of the process. But tell me what you're going to do, because at the end of the day, John Bel Edwards has not failed as governor.
And it's interesting that that's the Republican candidate that the voters picked over Abrams, who's kind of this established, just a normal run-of-the-mill politician, not too eccentric, kind of a little boring. That type of typical Republican candidate that actually polled way lower than Eddie Rispone did, who's this inflammatory Trump-esque figure, I would honestly call him.
You're still seeing some of the leftover, look, this goes back to Perot. Even before then, goes back to John Anderson. This people have this imaginary. They're waiting for the knight in shining armor to come riding in at the end of the movie and save the day, and it's the guy in the white hat who has this.
Yeah, I bet you Eddie Rispone wears a white hat.
They're looking for someone to save them from themselves, and so they're going to vote for. When the Republicans were running the 2016, presidential primary, every person that announced was instantly the front runner. It was at one point. It was every new candidate was like, this guy's the best, and his numbers go way up until he opens his mouth, and then they realize, well, maybe not. And so here you have the Republicans with a decent candidate with Abrahamson, who's a businessman and also a congressman, but no name recognition and no money, no real traction. And this Rispone guy comes in, and he's got a lot of money to throw around, and all of a sudden there's this call to arms around this guy that no one knows what he's about, what he's going to do. He's got no track record politically, doesn't speak particularly well, can't really articulate any positions.
Sounds familiar.
But because he's the quote unquote outsider, right? Everyone flocks to him as though he's going to be the Messiah. Well, I'm call me old school, but I want a little bit of experience at the head of state. Yes, okay, boomer, right?
Well, that being said, I think that this election in Kentucky and going back to John Bel Edwards' first term as governor, the reason why he was elected, I don't think that these elections are indicative of a disapproval of the Republican Party. I think these elections are indicative of a disapproval of very specific candidates from the Republican Party. Like, the fact of the matter is Trump still carried Kentucky by 30 points. So everyone who thinks that Kentucky is suddenly going to start voting blue in the 2020 election, that's a little misguided.
And every other statewide office other than the governorship went Republican. Yeah. And so, and generally speaking, what you're saying is true because people don't vote party at a state level. All politics is local, right? So the further away you get, the more difficult it is to touch that person, the more likely that the election is going to fall on the party lines. But even in a statewide race like the governorship or something else, there are proxies between you and that person that you respect. Like, for instance, in the governorship, right, here in Louisiana. So you've got, in New Orleans, the ads that are running, you've got the former sheriff of Jefferson Parish, the current sheriff of Jefferson Parish, the criminal sheriff of Orleans Parish, the DA of Jefferson Parish, all running commercials endorsing the governor. You've got the former General Russell Honoré, who was the hero of the Katrina disaster relief effort here in Louisiana, who everyone said was just a tremendous spokesperson and a source of great pride for Louisiana, made his first political endorsement, public endorsing John Bel Edwards. So people are invested in these proxies, in turn because it's a local feel, and then they can still maintain this sort of like disconnect. Like a Republican go to the poll in Louisiana, vote for John Bel Edwards as a Democrat, and not feel bad about supporting the Democratic Party, because John Bel is not Washington, D.C. Yeah. And the chasm cannot be understated. There's a gulf between a Democrat in Louisiana and a Democrat in Washington that only lives inside the Beltway. Yeah. They're not. You can't. Look. If Scalise were to change his party tomorrow, he would probably win re-election. He's that loved as a man, right? People aren't so married to the idea of a Republican or a Democrat if they know or they feel they know an individual and they trust their motivations and trust what they stand for, they'll follow that person into the ballot box and give them their support.
Yeah. I do think that in the long run, state elections do have the potential to change the national narrative. I just don't think that it's going to happen as quickly as the Democratic Party is kind of envisioning with these elections. Obviously, states are, quote unquote, laboratories of democracy, that little civics term that people use, and that's how you can implement new policies and bring about social, whatever, economic, whatever change you want. And I think that that's a realistic viewpoint. I just don't think that basically, I think the Democratic Party is expecting this quick paradigm shift to come about with these elections, and I don't think that's what they're going to see. I think it's a little more idealistic than their viewpoint needs to be, but I do think that it can have a very important impact on the 2020 elections depending on how these governorships go.
Look, I think that the swell of support for Democratic candidates across the country is not an indication of the support for Democratic policy so much as it is a support for the anti-Trump fervor in this country. If someone else were president, and you could argue the point that if Trump
but I don't agree because, if it was anti-Trump, it wouldn't have happened in Kentucky.
Let's just say that John Kasich had won the election, right? Let's say Trump didn't get in and Kasich had won the nomination, right? If the Republicans had run their business better. So we're assuming
nobody ran for president.
No, let's assume that. All right, Trump's in the election, and 9 of the other 14 candidates get out before South Carolina. Cruz gets a nomination. Or somebody else wins, because Trump never got more than 25% of the vote. Because a non-Trump vote was 75% of the Republicans, and it was very loud, it was forceful. The Republicans just assumed he wouldn't get the nomination. They just assumed that they could beat him because there's no way on earth that people would vote for this guy. That was the mindset they brought to the election. So at the end of the day, if Trump doesn't get the nomination, any one of the Republican candidates beats Hillary. Her negatives were only south of Trump's. That was it. No one had worse negatives than her, right? And so she loses. Someone else is president. There is no impeachment scandal. There is no Russia probe. You've got 4 years of a Republican administration. The economy is going to it may not be as red. Who knows? But the economy won't be awful. It'll be decent. There'll be a second term coming up. You won't have all this clamoring for everyone trying to be the person that beats Trump, because there's something about being the person that beats Trump. The person that beat Hitler, the person that shot Osama bin Laden, the person that knocked off, the bad guy, they want to be the one that unseats Trump. They want that feather in their hat.
I mean, I agree that applies at the national level, especially like with congressional elections. But I just don't think that the state elections, like you said, are that political. I mean, like if you look, I like speaking specifically to this microcosm of this Kentucky election. The guy that got supplanted by a Democratic candidate was just a bad guy. Look, nobody liked him.
Listen.
Teachers striking against him. He wants to take away their pension. He wants to take away voters' rights. He's just no one likes him. None of the politicians like him. None of the people like him. He had 50% approval rating in the Republican Party.
Think about this.
30% of the state.
The reason that John Bel Edwards is governor today is because the Republican Party could not tell David Vitter just to go home. Look at South Carolina, right? Or is it North Carolina? Or is it Virginia? Which is the one that said the election is now? Virginia. All right. Edit that out. Look at Virginia, right? So 4 months ago, the Democratic Party in Virginia is on the ropes. They're spinning completely out of control. The governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, blackface, sexual harassment scandals. I mean, it's like the Republicans are in such a state of disarray in Virginia, they couldn't win that election, right? The Republicans just can't win these elections because they don't know how to run. They can't run their party. Period.
Well, I think that just stems back to their identity crisis that's been happening since what's his face?
Who?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney?
In my head, I was like, he has a really punchable face. What's his name? Yeah, but I think that just kind of stems back to that, as they've been kind of spiraling, especially in 2016 with Trump. They had a lot of identity issues and whether or not to claim President Trump. But I think they've more than less come to the consensus that they do claim him.
Well, the Republicans are. I think the Republicans, honestly, as a national party, have lost their way. They don't know what they really stand for, other than they don't want that. And they point across the aisle at the freak show, which is the Democratic Party. But the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is that the Democrats, and this has been a long time coming, right? The Democrats have the big tent, right? And they're all weird, but they're all weird together. And the Republicans, if you disagree with the Republican on one little thing, you're anathema. Right? You can have 100 Republicans and they're going to fall out with each other over scintillas of stuff. Just the littlest thing. Whereas the Democrats can all decide to be on the same side of the table and argue the same point together. You never see that on the Republican side. Look, if Marco Rubio is out of Florida on Super Tuesday, Trump isn't president. He didn't get out till after Super Tuesday. Right? That's the kind of stuff. If you have a political party and you can't tell someone not to run, you don't have a party.
Okay, but drawing back to these elections and what they mean for
I digress.
Yeah, you did digress.
I don't know that they mean. I really don't. Look. At the end of the day, if John Bel Edwards loses the election, Trump will claim a giant victory, which won't be his. If John Bel Edwards wins the election, the Democrats will claim a giant victory, which won't be theirs.
That's the thing is sorry, my mic hit the thing. So for the Republican Party, do you think it would honestly be more beneficial in these state elections for Trump to stay out? Because he's been making a lot of visits. He made a visit before our primaries. He came and basically said, vote for Abrams or vote for Rispone. I don't care who, just pick a Republican. He went to Kentucky. He went to Mississippi, where they actually did pull out a victory over there. So do you think that Trump's hand in this, I mean, he is such a polarizing figure. He's really he is very popular in Kentucky, arguably very popular here. But in those other states that in the South that might be more on the borderline, do you think that Trump's involvement in these state elections is beneficial for the Republican Party, or do you think it's something that, like you said, this could be drawn back to an anti-Trump movement that could actually be hurting the Republican Party through having his voice backing these candidates.
Well, I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. We have to see what the outcome of the election is going to be. Bell Edwards has done a pretty good job of tagging Risponi with Trump, tying him to Trump, in a kind of a clever way too. He's using Trump's
Phony Risponi.
Yeah, he calls him phony Risponi, which sounds like something Trump would say. And the Trump's commercials are kind of bizarre because, he's got this way of running on and saying, "You've got to vote John Bell Edwards out."
I know when you hit the table. That's going to be loud.
So these commercials that the guy's running are just, they're really weird, and but I don't know that as a proxy for the national election, this is that great of a place to draw the line. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't know that Trump's helping a whole lot. I don't think he helped at all in Kentucky. He didn't have any impact in Mississippi whatsoever. I mean, that was going to go that way anyway, whether the president showed up or not. I think the president likes to show up and have big crowds and take credit when there's no real.
If anything, that's for the presidential election. That's the only thing that it really impacts in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. But I think that, I think that what happened in Kentucky, I think, is kind of an anomaly. I think it's really just due to the fact they had a bad guy up there, and the attorney general who was running against him, his dad was like a beloved governor. He had really good history, so I think that he had that name recognition going for him. Like you said, Bevin was just the wrong candidate. They should have never run him / elected him in the first place. But in regards to Louisiana specifically, I personally, I'm just worried. I'm just worried that, because like you said, if it rains, John Bell Edwards loses. He needs every single vote he can get.
Well, the forecast is good for Saturday.
The forecast, yeah. So he needs every single person he can get out there, which is like a scary concept.
Well, they're saying that they're getting a great deal of early voting in the cities, which they're not quite sure how that's going to, foretell the turnout on election day. It is a statistical dead heat, and right now, typically you would expect. I think there's like 6% undecided or 7% undecided. You would expect that to break against the incumbent, but it doesn't quite feel that way, Well,
I think it's because just of the nature of the candidates. Eddie Risponi is someone that you align with him or you don't. You're a Trump supporter or you're not. John Bell Edwards is obviously the more nuanced candidate in this race. If you like Trump, he's Risponi's the obvious candidate, and that's something that people aren't really undecided about at this point in time.
Yeah, I guess
I think that's kind of a unique circumstance, seeing as that candidate is so close, literally so closely aligned with the president.
Yeah, I just think that John Bell Edwards and the state Democratic Party are probably going to have a better election day operation for turnout. They should get a better turnout. The support for Risponi, I think, is much more just, I don't know, like a whipsaw, reactionary kind of support, going back to the Ross Perot thing. And you can't remember this when the Tea Party, which was a couple of, after the second Perot run, which really swept the country, this idea that let's throw the bastards out and take this country back kind of thing. There's still a little bit of that where, they want this business person to come in. And what surprises me is that people are still enamored of that, because I think governors and presidents, you saw it with like Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State. You can't take a guy that's a CEO of a corporation and expect that to translate what they do into public sector work with the same sort of effectiveness, because it's a totally different set of skills and expectations.
And with that,
I appreciate that.
Sorry. I think that is a great place to conclude this episode.
But wait a minute. What about? I had this great line I was going to tell you about the president's Southern strategy.
Okay, please give along.
It just occurred to me that he's spending all this time in the South. It's like All he's have left is the Strom Thurmond and the George Wallace block. I mean, is that what he's going for?
Okay. Well, him and Joe Biden will have much in common. And I feel like that concludes this episode.
That was a rambling episode.
So this is supposed to be a mini episode, but thank you for listening to this podcast, and thank you to my very own father for serving as a guest, as the idiot in the soup, if you will.
I've always wanted to be an idiot.
Well, buddy, I got some great news for you. All right, so goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Idiot Soup Podcast.
You can find us online at idiotsouppodcast.com, on Instagram at Idiot Soup Podcast, on Twitter at Idiot Soup Pod, and also on Facebook, Idiot Soup Podcast, a political podcast. You can listen to future podcast episodes on YouTube, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more platforms. You can find all of those platforms out on our website, and feel free to contact us. So, goodbye.
Goodbye.